Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be talking about all of my most anticipated releases from April until June, so I'm doing things a little bit different this year. Instead of telling you guys in January all of the books that I was looking forward to for the entire year, I decided to break it down into quarterly videos. That way you'll be able to hear about a book much closer to its release. Then hopefully you won't forget about it, because I know that tends to happen to me in January. If I hear a lot of things that are coming out, then not everything necessarily stays on my radar, but this serves as a good reminder, and also hopefully I'll introduce you to some new things that maybe you haven't heard of yet. But anyway, moving on to the books. I'm going to be discussing them in release date order, so that way it'll be easier to keep track. So first up on April 20th is The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the third book in the From Flesh and Blood series. I read the first one back in January and I really enjoyed it, and I haven't read the second yet because I've been waiting for Illumicrate to come out with those beautiful editions of like the hardcovers, so I don't want to have to purchase it twice. So waiting on that, but really excited to read that one and then read the third one. Next up on April 27th is Anna K. Away by Jenny Lee. This is the sequel to Anna K., which I read last year and I enjoyed. It wasn't like my favorite book ever, but I'm definitely interested enough to continue. It's one of those books about like rich kids doing drugs and just having way too much money that you can't look away from. So yeah, I'm curious to see where the story's going to go. It's also loosely based on Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, and I really liked the twist that it kind of took within the first one, so curious to see what's going to happen to these characters. Then also on April 27th, this is one that I'm so excited for. It's called Dial A For Aunties. This is by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and it is like a murder mystery rom-com. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, and I cannot wait to read it. It follows a woman who accidentally kills her blind date, and then she calls in her meddlesome aunties to help her dispose of the body, but it turns out that disposing of a body is more difficult than she thought that it might be, and her aunts work for a wedding company, so after some kind of mishap, the dead body ends up getting shipped to the wedding of a billionaire, which is like the biggest wedding that they've ever been in charge of. So they obviously have to do some damage control and try to intercept that package before it just like shows up at this wedding. Like I said, it just sounds ridiculous, and I'm so here for it. Next is a book that is not a fiction novel, but it's part of a series of books that Andrew and I have been collecting. So the book that I'm talking about is Vanricktons' Guide to Ravenloft. This is actually a Dungeons and Dragons book, so we've been kind of slowly acquiring lots of the 5e Dungeons and Dragons books because we do play a game. Well, we actually played 2 games, but because of the past year of like quarantine, we actually haven't played one of them in a while, which is sad because that was so much fun. But this is basically a guidebook, and it's all about Ravenloft, and actually one of our last sessions was at Ravenloft, so I have to kind of wait to read it until we wrap that up because I don't want to get spoiled on anything. But it's one of my favorite settings that we've been in so far. And yeah, I can't wait to add this one to our collection. This one comes out on May 18th. Next on my list is a romance, and that is Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bellflower. This one comes out on May 25th. It looks delightful, and I really love this cover. I think it's just super gorgeous. It follows a hopeless romantic named Brandon who created a dating app so that people can find like the one person that they're meant to find. And he's been harboring a crush on his sister's best friend for like so many years, basically since their childhood. And then she ends up showing up in Seattle, but she is someone that is planning on traveling, doesn't really want to be tied down or anything. And the pair end up connecting and sparks fly, and it sounds so cute. Next, I am so excited for One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I've talked about this one on my channel a couple of times, and I actually have a copy of it already, so I'm planning on reading it very soon. This is a sapphic kind of time travel-y romance. It takes place on the New York subway, and all I know is that one of the characters is from the 1970s, but somehow ends up on the subway, and that's where our 2 characters meet. I'm so curious to see how it goes. Some of my best friends have already read it and loved it, and I just know that I'm going to as well. I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I've been so looking forward to Casey's next book. Also on June 1st, I am very much looking forward to The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This book weaves together Greek mythology and murder and obsession, and it sounds amazing. It sounds like it's going to be kind of like a dark academia thriller novel. It actually kind of reminds me of If We Were Villains, which I really loved, so I feel like I'm gonna love this one too. It follows a group therapist named Mariana who is convinced that the charming Greek tragedy professor at Cambridge is a murderer. He is universally adored by everyone, but most especially by an all-female secret society called the Maidens. When one of the Maidens turns up dead, Mariana becomes obsessed with proving his guilt to the point of like ruining personal relationships in her own life, and I'm so excited. I can't wait to read this. Then on June 21st, I'm really looking forward to That Weekend by Kara Thomas. I've loved all of Kara Thomas's other books that I've read, and I've been really looking forward to her next one. And this one sounds particularly exciting. It's another thriller novel, and it's following three best friends who go on a secret trip to this lake house. It's supposed to be like the perfect prom getaway weekend, but then tragedy strikes. Claire wakes up alone and bloodied on this hiking trail, and she has no memory at all of the past 48 hours. She doesn't know where her two best friends are, and she's basically desperate to remember what happened, but she knows that it can't be a good thing, so it's also kind of stressful trying to retrieve that memory, but I'm excited to read it. So I was wrong. I don't know what past Kristen did when she was creating this list. I'm usually very careful about double checking everything, but apparently I did not put these in order. So we're just going to go back to May now and talk about another release that I'm very excited for, and that is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manonsuela. This one comes out on May 4th, and it's the first book in a new cozy mystery series called Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery. This follows a character named Lila who moves back home in order to try to cope with a bad breakup that she's just had, and it's having all of the kind of tropes that you would see in rom-coms, like moving back home, she gets tasked with helping her Tita's failing restaurant, but then things take a turn. A notoriously nasty food critic comes into the restaurant and ends up dropping dead just moments after talking to Lila, and it turns out that that critic was actually none other than her ex-boyfriend. So obviously Lila becomes suspect number one in the police investigation, and the police are very uninterested in trying to dig deeper and look into what actually happened. So Lila has to take matters into her own hands, and it sounds great, and I'm all for cozy mysteries. I think this one's going to be very exciting, and I hope that it will end up being a long series. Next on my list is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This one comes out on May 11th, and I really loved Emily Henry's first adult romance novel that she released last year called Beach Read, and so did a whole bunch of other people, but I'm really hoping that this book will be just as good. This follows two characters named Alex and Poppy who have pretty much been inseparable since they went to college. They do everything together despite being so different from one another. They're basically like polar opposites. Poppy is a wild child and Alex is very rigid and structured. For most of the year they live apart. She lives in New York City and he lives in their small hometown. But every single summer for the past decade, the two of them have taken a trip together, like a week-long vacation with one another, until 2 years ago when everything got ruined. Poppy ends up getting into a rut and she's pretty unhappy with what's going on. And when someone asks her, when was the last time that she was happy, she knows that it was the last time that she was with Alex. So she convinces him to take one more vacation together where she's going to try to fix things and become best friends again, but probably there will be romance. Then on May 4th, I'm looking forward to 10 Truths and a Dare by Ashley Elston. This is a companion novel to 10 Blind Dates, which I loved. So we're following, there was a huge family, huge cast of characters in 10 Blind Dates, and now we're following the cousin of the main character, Sophie, from 10 Blind Dates. So in this book, we're following Olivia. To be honest, I haven't really cared much for YA lately, but I have loved all of Ashley Elston's books, so there is no way that I will be missing this one. It takes place during senior week, and Olivia should really just be coasting into graduation until she can start the next chapter of her life. But there's a whole situation that arises with an unsigned off-campus PE form, and Olivia has to make it up by doing community service, but she can't let her mother know, so she enlists the help of her cousins. Olivia has to volunteer at a golf course, and she ends up meeting a cute boy while she's there, and I'm very excited to read this one. Next is another psychological thriller novel that I'm really looking forward to. I've talked about this one on my channel before too, but this one is called The Other Black Girl. This is by Zakiya Delilah Harris, and it comes out on June 1st. It's described as Devil Wears Prada meets Get Out. Here for it. It's a thriller set in New York City at a book publisher's office, so it's got so many things going for it. So many of my interests are hit just in that alone. So we're following two Black women who work for Wagner Books. One of them is a seasoned employee and the other one is a new hire. And when Hazel, the new hire, ends up becoming like the office darling, the older employee Nella is kind of left in the dust, and then Nella starts getting threatening messages at her desk that tell her to leave Wagner Books now. And I'm very, very much looking forward to reading this. Then on June 22nd, I am really hoping that Kiss Me at the Stroke of Midnight Volume 12 will come out. This is actually the final volume in the whole series. I've been waiting for it forever. The last volume, Volume 11, got pushed back like 100 times and the 12th one has gotten pushed back a couple of times too, but I'm hoping that this release date will finally stick. I can't wait to see how the story is going to end up. I really like this manga series. It's like a Cinderella story about a high school girl that falls in love with a J-pop star, and it's just adorable. And then last on the list is another thriller, and that is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This one's going to be coming out on June 29th. I've loved all of Riley Sager's books that I've read too, so this was like an obvious choice for me. It takes place in the 1990s, and it follows a movie-obsessed college student named Charlie Jordan who is in the car on a long ride home back to Ohio with a man who might be a serial killer. They met on a college board to share a ride home together. Charlie is actually kind of fleeing college after her best friend is murdered by the serial killer that is dubbed the Campus Killer. And Josh says that he's going home to Ohio to take care of his sick father, but Charlie notices that there are kind of like a bunch of holes in his story, but she has no way to prove it. And it's also the 1990s, so cell phones are not a thing. So basically her only option is to try to survive the night. It sounds so good. So those are all of the new releases from April to June that I'm looking forward to reading. There were definitely a lot of romance and thriller books on this list. There's like basically no fantasy that was coming out that I was looking forward to, which I thought was really surprising because that's typically my favorite genre. But I guess it makes sense heading into summer to have more light, fun, murdery titles. Let me know if you're looking forward to anything that I've mentioned, or if you've maybe read anything already, if you happen to have early copies. That's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!